Even gods must die today. The golden monkey's sheer destructive power tore through Sigma's energy barrier, landing a devastating punch straight to the so-called god's mouth. The energy continued to surge, engulfing Sigma completely, as if it intended to roast him alive inside. He roared. He screamed. He howled in every possible pitch, from deep bellows to high shrieks. But what could he do? He was nothing more than a lizard being burned to a crisp. At this level, the power difference was simply too vast. The energy the golden monkey exhaled wasn't just enough to incinerate Sigma, it felt like it could scorch the entire battlefield itself. When the attack finally subsided, the source of the golden energy was revealed, a strange head resembling that of a wild boar. But behind it, instead of a body, was a long, slender form like a snake. Its two pale, lifeless eyes stared blankly, sending chills down the spine of anyone who dared to look at it. In the distance, Sigma's bruised and battered body still managed to stand on shaky legs. Amidst the rubble that had been shattered by the monkey's power, he looked like a ragged kitchen cloth that had been used for 11 years straight. Coughing up blood, he dragged himself along the ground like a wounded insect, barely clinging to life after being doused in lethal poison. But Sigma wasn't finished yet. Summoning his last reserves of strength, he swiftly slashed his hand downward. A brilliant green light burst forth, 3 razor-sharp energy slashes, fueled by pure hatred, shot straight toward the golden monkey's head with deadly precision. The monkey immediately raised its muscular arm to block the attack, though the wounds were shallow, barely drawing blood. The pain and sheer annoyance of being struck sent a new wave of fury through its body. It let out a deafening roar. Across from it, Sigma, despite his battered form, scrambled forward on his spindly limbs, determined to continue the fight. "You dare?" The golden monkey launched an upward strike infused with enough energy to send Sigma flying once more. But using the same technique twice against a battle-hardened god like Sigma was not going to be easy. Sigma took the punch on purpose, just to get closer to the golden monkey. Without hesitation, he sank his razor-sharp teeth deep into the beast's chest, biting down to the bone. Blood and torn flesh oozed out, thick and sticky. He refused to let go, no matter how much the golden monkey howled in agony, struggling desperately to tear him off. Sharp spikes erupted from Sigma's body, wrapping tightly around the beast like thorn vines. No, more than that. Sigma's tail grew longer, coiling around the golden monkey several times before constricting like a giant python. Even its powerful golden wings, once so mighty, were now pinned shut. The golden monkey was completely trapped. Sigma slithered his head forward, preparing to sink his fangs into his prey. "This isn't over yet," he muttered, coughing up blood. It was a short sentence, but it was enough. He wanted to make sure his opponent understood before he finished him off. But instead of using his razor claws, Sigma unleashed 10,000 fangs devouring bone. Just as the name suggested, countless jagged teeth erupted from his mouth, sinking deep into the golden monkey's flesh. Bright red blood splattered onto the sharp, white fangs, making it look as if they had pierced straight to the marrow. The sight was gruesome. One couldn't help but feel pity for the golden monkey. Yet, one had to admit, the god of creation was a terrifyingly skilled warrior. Sigma's techniques constantly shifted between close combat and ranged attacks, and every melee move was designed to kill. With each bite, 10,000 fangs tore through more flesh, sending streams of blood dripping onto the battlefield. But it wasn't over. Sigma arched his body and unleashed a crimson pillar of energy, striking right at the point where his tail had coiled around the golden monkey. He wasn't going to let that damned beast transform into some kind of snake or insect and escape. Sigma's energy completely overwhelmed the golden monkey's power. The battlefield was bathed in a blood-red glow. Badger and the boar could only watch from a distance, too terrified to step in. They wanted to help, but after witnessing Sigma's devastating attacks firsthand, they suddenly realized how foolish their earlier plan had been. They had actually thought they could team up and take down this god to avenge their fallen friend. As Sigma poured more energy into his attack, something unexpected happened. A hand burst out from below and clamped his jaws shut. Sigma's eyes widened in shock. He had been unleashing his full power downward. How had the golden monkey moved without him noticing? Looking down, he locked eyes with the beast's glowing, unblinking gaze. The sight was terrifying. The golden monkey wasn't struggling. It wasn't explaining itself. It just stared. Sigma tried to speak, but his mouth was sealed shut. He gritted his teeth and hissed through his clenched jaws. How? Do you have an immortal body? The golden wings flared open, forcing a gap in Sigma's thorn tail. In that instant, the monkey's mouth stretched wide, revealing something monstrous within. A massive, snake-like creature writhed out of its throat, slithering free. Next came another head, a beast with gleaming golden fur and razor-sharp fangs, lunging upward like a predator striking from below. Then another, and another. One after another, fanged monstrosities poured out, all of them lunging straight for Sigma's flesh. The once unbreakable tail that had bound the golden monkey so tightly was now being ripped apart. Large chunks of Sigma's body were torn away as monstrous jaws clamped down from the inside out. It was horrifying. And that wasn't all. Around the golden monkey's original head, countless other bestial faces emerged, mutated, monstrous, and ravenous. They clawed and snapped, writhing chaotically, as if celebrating some grotesque festival of beasts. Some of the heads had eyes, while others did not. Only the razor-sharp fangs remained, ready to tear apart anything within reach. Sigma, at this point, there was no way he could get back up. His regeneration ability had failed him. His spiritual energy was completely drained. He could only stare in horror at the grotesque form of the golden monkey. Could he even call it a golden monkey anymore? It now resembled a demonic warden of hell, covered in countless eyes and bloodthirsty fangs. Am I going to die here? Sigma didn't say those words out loud, but the golden monkey could tell just by looking at his condition that he was on the verge of death. Feeling victorious, it didn't hesitate to boast. I have devoured countless souls from the abyss of the desert. Among them are the 72 strongest souls, souls that couldn't be fully absorbed. Now, they're inside me, eager to consume you. As if to confirm its words, one of its massive mouths opened wide, saliva dripping down in strands, sending a chill down Sigma's spine. He immediately realized the terrifying truth: this creature possessed the ability to devour. It might not be able to regenerate its battle form, but if Sigma could escape like he always had, he could still return for revenge. But if he was devoured by this thing, even his soul would be destroyed. That would be true death. Sigma's pupils reflected his fear, but he forced himself to remain defiant. He let out a wild, mocking laugh. Even if you kill me, it won't matter. The Divine One still lives. He will only grow stronger. Oh? Is that a threat? 72 monstrous heads lunged forward like a pack of ravenous beasts that had been starved for too long. Sigma kept talking, but it didn't matter. They sank their fangs into him, his head, his neck, his back, his body. They tore at his flesh, gnawed on his bones. Sigma never stopped laughing. In fact, his laughter grew even more hysterical. A manic, deranged cackle echoed through the battlefield as despair consumed him whole. All of them wanted to say a few more words, but they were devoured in an instant. Their flesh and blood were slurped clean. The so-called god of creation had become nothing more than a feast for the monstrous heads. which tore through skin, claws, and bones without hesitation. Meanwhile, the monkey's tail swayed lazily, as if nothing was happening. The scene before Badger and Boar was like a glimpse into hell itself. They stood frozen, unable to utter a single word. The thick, pungent stench of blood invaded their nostrils. What they saw with their own eyes made one of them press their lips together, and the other clench their teeth tightly. Droplets of blood splattered all the way to where they stood. It was horrifying. The golden monkey's method of dealing with enemies was far more brutal than ever before. They had fought through hundreds of battles, big and small, but never had they witnessed an enemy being eaten alive like this. Even the main head of the golden monkey was now buried in that crimson mess, the sounds of gnawing and slurping filling the air. It was completely immersed in its feast. But then, without warning, the sigil stone emitted a blinding light. All the monstrous heads were abruptly sucked back into the golden monkey's back, reversing the process of their emergence. Its massive body was suddenly lifted into the air, caught in a violent whirlwind. It spun wildly for a long time before finally crashing down, revealing its battered and wounded form. And then, in an instant, the golden monkey had reverted to its original form. It was now even smaller than the stone itself. Both the tiny monkey and the sigil stone plummeted from a great height, slamming into the ground with a thunderous impact that sent shockwaves through the area. Silence followed. From a distant place, a foreign being observed the scene and fell into deep contemplation. So Sigma is dead. His narrowed eyes reflected his confusion. Meanwhile, the remaining gods erupted in disbelief. What? What did you just say? Countless eyes turned toward their commander. He calmly drew 2 small circles of light in the air and spoke. Our power all originates from the Supreme Lord. He divided his strength into 12 parts, these 12 gods. You. With a simple flick of his hand, the 2 orbs of light split into countless fragments, like shards of glass, and rained down upon the remaining gods. But strangely, the moment the fragments touched their bodies, a surge of spiritual energy enveloped them. What is this? Why do I suddenly feel so much stronger? The leader spoke in a steady voice. If one of us perishes, their power returns to the remaining gods. That is why Sigma never feared being killed by the golden monkey. His death only strengthens the other divine beings. A tall figure with sharp claws examined his hand. So their deaths are not entirely meaningless. Huh! At the very least, they make us stronger. But this also proves that our enemy is powerful. We cannot afford to underestimate them. Who would have thought that the subordinate of the exotic tree was this formidable? If they knew that it was just a single beast, the golden monkey, that had slain Sigma, they would have been utterly shocked. But at this moment, whether the golden monkey was alive or dead remained unknown. Its 2 companions stood by its side, anxious. They nudged its tiny body repeatedly, letting out worried squeaks. But there was no response. Meanwhile, the unfinished war council resumed. Orders had been given. This time, there would be no strategic teleportation arrays. There was no time to wait. Their mission had to be completed swiftly. The divine beings were now moving toward their ultimate goal, attacking the tree of life itself. Their invasion had to succeed, no matter the cost.